Hi guys, welcome back to another episode of the MoxiePod. I'm Sonia and I'm here with Sarah. Together we have a cerebral palsy podcast where we have a very open discussion about CP, talking everything about it. The challenges, the funny, the good, and the achievements. Let's start building a better mindset together.
Sonia. Today we have a very special guest. I'm so excited for you to meet him. It's Antony. He joined us all the way from Scotland, guys. He's a
Yeah.
he's a social researcher and has special interest in charity work and how media represents disabilities. He's also done some research into online dating and the stigma that comes after disclosing a disability. Many people with CP, including myself, have tried online dating. I, for one, never quite got the hang of it, but I'm happy to hear the cheat code, if there is one. I know we'll have some fun stuff to cover, but first I want to welcome Antony to the pod. We're so delighted to have you. Thank you so much. Would you do the pleasure of introducing yourself? And I'm
Yeah.
curious also to learn how you found out about the podcast.
Okay. Well, thanks for having me, guys. It's an absolute pleasure
No,
to be
it's
here,
our
of
pleasure.
course. Thank you. Yeah, to introduce myself, I've been an advocate of disabled people for basically my entire life.
Wow.
From a very young age, I've been involved with disability-related charities, usually in terms of fundraising or raising awareness of cerebral palsy or disability in general.
Mhm.
Then after that, I started to volunteer for a number of these charities, usually in a marketing capacity. As Sarah said, I don't know, did you say I have a degree in marketing? You did.
Yeah.
So
I
because I
said
have a degree in
social
marketing,
research, but you
yeah,
get into
yeah,
it.
no, perfect. Yeah. So I have a degree in marketing, but I also have a master's in the rather loftily titled Applied Educational and Social Research. And as Sarah said again, that's why I'm here to talk to you today. A lot of my research I've done, in fact, both my theses related to the sort of disability and attitudes held by and about disabled people, and the impact that these could have. So yeah, we're going to talk about one of those today.
Online
So
dating.
excited. And
Yes,
really quick, how did you find out about the podcast? I'm just curious.
No, I'm always
sure.
curious how to
Yeah.
find out.
Well, so as I've said, disability has been a huge part of my life, being disabled myself, but also being involved with all this charity work. And I just always am on the lookout for ways I can be involved, ways that I can help, what's going on. So I can't remember if I searched for cerebral palsy videos on YouTube or if it came up as one of I can't remember if it was a recommendation, but I found you guys on YouTube
Okay.
and I watched your videos and I thought they were really informative. And I think they involve like a lot of people from different walks of life.
That's what we
And
want.
I'd never sort of come across a podcast specifically dealing with our disability. So as a result, I just wanted to see if I could get involved in any way. And I reached out to you guys, and
I'm
here I am.
so glad you
I
did.
love that so much. So I was thinking about today we were doing this, and I was thinking our podcast is such a kind of ragtag, kind of adult with CP podcast because we
Yeah.
swear, we talk about real stuff,
Good.
and it's
Like
kind
cliche.
of real shit, and it's so I don't know. I feel so happy that you, all the way in Scotland, came
Yeah,
across this, and we're just so happy to have you. Also, I
me too.
cannot
It's a
say
pleasure.
that enough.
No,
Yeah,
same
But
I'm
infinitely.
happy to be
yes,
here. I'm really
yes.
happy.
Um, do you want to get into the meat and potatoes, the good stuff?
Sure.
Okay.
Yeah.
Um,
If you want to, I'm happy to.
Okay,
Yes.
I wonder what prompted you to get into research, and
Yeah.
subsequently, how did the research topic of online dating make it to your thesis?
Okay, so I got into my master's really out of necessity because, as I said, I did my honors, my undergraduate, my honors in marketing and Italian, but that's irrelevant for today. So my first thesis was on the representation of disabled people in charity advertising, and so I did that, and naturally I wanted to continue my academic career. I had big plans to be a lecturer, a professor, and all this kind of stuff.
I think
So,
you still will be. There's still time.
maybe,
Yeah, you got it.
maybe, yeah. And so I wanted to continue my research interests, as I mentioned. So I applied for my, I just decided to continue the marketing track and I applied to do my master's. I got into my marketing master's, decided it really wasn't what I wanted to do. So then I thought maybe I'll do a marketing PhD because that's more like research based. And at least
Wow.
at my university, the master's for marketing was like far more practical, and I didn't really have a lot of choice in just what I wanted to focus on. And I really just wanted to focus on my disability related research. So I got into my marketing master's, didn't want to do that, applied for my PhD, got into my marketing PhD, and
Smart.
told them about told them about what I wanted to research and what my interest domains are, i.e., disabled people, and none of the lecturers were interested in my research topics
Ah,
at
screw
all.
them.
Like, none of them were either able to contribute or wanted to. I don't know. Let's just say they weren't able to because it wasn't, in their fields of interest.
Yeah.
So that was a bummer. I think really it was just because it wasn't marketing related enough. It was more like socially based, like my ideas.
Right.
Obviously, my undergraduate was it had to be kind of very marketing sort of focused as it was. But my interest had kind of grown to more of like a social aspect, as I said, like attitudes, lived experiences, that kind of thing. So
Yeah.
when I couldn't find anyone to advise me on my PhD research, I just completely changed gears and thought, I don't need to be in the marketing faculty. I can
Yeah.
apply to like another faculty. So I went into my university and spoke to someone at the humanities faculty, and they were like, we have so many people here that have covered your areas of research themselves. We have so many people here that would be really interested in helping you kind of nurture your areas of interest. So then that's how I got into my social research master's through the humanities faculty. And yeah, that's what I did. So it was great.
I think you kind of answered my question, but I
Good.
know your research is focused on disability, and we
Yeah.
can all say we're biased. We want to learn more about that. But did
Yeah.
you find anyone who was able-bodied that was very interested in the same type of stuff you were? Or is that far and few between?
Um, I think, well, I know that the lecturer of my course, shout out to Alistair Wilson if you're watching, hi.
Hello.
Hi, thank
Yeah,
you.
he was the lecturer of my course, my master's degree, and then he actually came to me once we had all figured out what our theses were going to be about. He came to me and asked me if he could be my advisor
Oh,
based on sort
That's
of my
awesome.
ideas.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I felt really
that's so
flattered by that
nice.
because I went
Yeah,
from
that.
like begging and pleading and trying to
Normally
find
you have to
someone with
chase
even
them.
like a remote interest, and he's like, "Can I please?" Also
Um,
because a lot of his focus in the past was on similar kinds of things. So he asked me. So he was obviously really interested in my work. But in terms of when I found that because for both of these research projects, for my honors and my masters, I interviewed people like a lot. That was a lot of my sort of information gathering
Okay.
was sort of face-to-face interviews. So I found that able-bodied people, and I'm not generalizing, I'm just saying the people I
It's the
interviewed,
numbers.
yeah, the people I interviewed who were able-bodied seemed really nervous. Like, and
Okay.
I'm not, I also can't say, I
You're
also
such
can't say that's because they're able-bodied and I'm disabled. I think a lot of it has to do with feeling like you're being interrogated or
Got
feeling
it.
like you're going to say the wrong answer. But that's what I noticed initially, at least, people were quite shy, quite awkward. And
Yeah.
also, let's not forget, I'm a disabled person asking you, an able bodied person, questions about your feelings and attitudes about disabled people. So I understand that it can be quite stressful
Yeah.
and you don't want to come off as an asshole, basically. But
hmm
in terms of other, like, in terms of able-bodied people, no, but I don't know if that means that they wouldn't be. I didn't really, doing a social sort of a degree in a social studies sort of sphere, ironically, can be quite isolating. A lot of the time when
Yeah.
you're doing research, any research really, you're just so focused on your research, your coursework, what you need to do, and so is everybody else. So I don't
Yeah.
remember like really talking to a lot of other students, for example. And my class was very small. I mean, I suppose my family were interested to a to a point. They
To a
would be
point.
like, "Oh, what are you doing?" And then I would start talking, and they'd be like, Anyway,
Yeah, totally.
so I
Yeah,
can't
I
to
get
answer your
that.
question. I don't know. Not really. Not really, I guess.
Okay, I think that's fair. I'm always curious to see just how people respond to
Yeah.
disabled people in general. And as you
hmm
said, it's like you're asking them to be like, you're directly asking them, am I okay? Kind of. Do
Yeah.
you understand?
Do
So,
you do you what do you think? Do you like me? Do you think
right.
I'm weird? Do you have
Right.
do you have biases? Like
Yeah.
when you look at this picture, what do you think? Like, yeah, it's
So,
difficult. I get it.
that,
I
yeah,
started talking to my advisor about like having someone who was able-bodied go in instead of me
yes.
and asking my
I wonder
questions.
how different the results would have been. Would they have been more
Yeah,
like
yeah,
asshole-ish in a way?
I
yeah,
I was just about to say that you hire a paid actor
yeah,
to be like,
yeah.
that's
Yeah,
crazy.
exactly. So basically, when you're undertaking sort of academic research, there are things that you need to, as a researcher, acknowledge
Mm-hmm.
in
Okay.
terms of how that can impact your research.
We're
So
study,
Oh, that's true.
I had to acknowledge that I am a disabled person asking able-bodied people how they feel about disabled people. So ultimately that's
yeah,
going to have some sort of influence that I
right,
can't control. Do you know what I mean?
right,
So that's the best you can do. I
right.
don't know if my university
Yeah.
had the budget to employ some actor
Yeah, these
being like,
universities can be really
hello,
stingy.
yeah, hello,
Um,
I'm Anthony Walker. I am able-bodied and have been since birth.
let's unpack your work. Um,
Let's.
so your online dating stuff. What
Yeah.
were you trying to find through your research? Like, did you have a thesis of?
Yeah, what was your thesis? I wanted to
Yeah.
ask that. Yeah.
Yeah, okay. So basically, to give you the title, it was the online dating experience of physically, so I had to narrow it down, physically
Right.
Mhm.
disabled people, the online dating experiences of physically disabled people, and the impact of disclosure, that is disclosing that you are disabled.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
And the inspiration for that really came about. I mean, I was really thankful that I thought of anything. But I'm really thankful and proud that I came up with this idea because it falls in line with my research interests, but like in a really interesting framing device.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So it came at a time when both my twin sister and I were using online dating websites,
Personal
and
experience.
we And one day I can't remember why, but I just asked her whether or not she mentions anywhere on her profile that she's disabled.
And your sister has CP too.
Yeah,
We
yeah,
should
she has
mention.
And
CP.
she's in a
Yeah,
wheelchair, right?
yes.
Okay.
So I asked her, and she did disclose, and I did not.
I applaud
So,
her for that, honestly.
so that just that idea was just really intriguing to me. You know, I wondered what motivated her to disclose and me not to disclose, and
Yeah.
why there was this difference in approach. And I'm not saying this has any weight to it, but you know, we're twins, we live in the same house, we had the same upbringing. You know, obviously we're not the same people, but there's something in there that has caused us to make those two different decisions. And I just wondered,
Yeah,
you
why?
know, from that point on, obviously I then was thinking, you know, what about other disabled people? How do they handle online dating? How do they negotiate disclosing or not their disability? So that was really the point of it. I have my reasons, which I believe would be the same if I were still online dating. But my rationale was that I didn't disclose because I wanted people to get to know me for the person who I know I am rather
Yeah.
than who they believe I could be or would be due to my, due to my disability and any preconceptions or misconceptions they might have about it. And whereas my sister, she just saw immediate disclosure as kind of a sort of an effective filtering process, you
Oh,
know.
like weed out the people that wouldn't be good anyway.
Exactly. She just thought that if someone isn't going to want to be in a relationship with me because I have a disability, then what's the point in continuing? What is the point in delaying the inevitable? You know?
Can I ask a question? Sorry,
Yeah,
two actually.
sure.
How old were you at this time?
Uh,
And what year was it, if you don't mind? Because I think that's pretty significant as
So
well.
I believe it was when I met my husband. I think
Okay.
it was around about that time. So I'm going to roughly say 2015.
Okay.
Not
So
that long
10,
ago.
10
Yeah.
years ago. Yeah,
Okay.
so
And
Well, I
I
don't know if
was
that's long in the research world.
I was 27. Yeah.
okay.
Oh,
And
my age.
also, is your sister, like, in the picture, could you
Yeah.
tell that she was disabled? Or is it
Yeah.
okay?
Yeah, that was her
Wow.
method of disclosure. She
Okay.
would disclose in a picture, she would write it in her bio.
Okay.
I
It was all
guess,
over.
So
yeah,
she
any
checked
opportunity
all
she
the
had.
boxes, right? She checked all the
Yeah,
boxes
yeah, yeah,
because she was so secure in herself that she was like, you know what? This is what people need to know, and if they have a problem with it,
yeah,
goodbye.
yeah.
Correct?
What's the
I
point?
Yes. Love it.
Yeah,
I love how she did that because, like, I think that's so beautiful and amazing that she was so confident in herself to do it. Because, like, I feel like
yeah,
me, I would do what you did. I'd
yeah,
pick a picture where you can't tell, never write in my
yeah,
bio because I want people to see me beyond the person. And I get
yeah,
her point of view, like, okay, like, she wants them to accept her like that. But then my thought process would be like, oh, like, maybe I get someone and it's not necessarily that they're bad, but maybe they just need to get used to me, right? And it's like it's something that they'll learn to accept, and
yeah,
even though they previously wouldn't have considered dating a disabled person,
yeah.
which I don't know if that's the right way to go about it, if that makes sense.
I don't think there is a right or a wrong way. I think you just need to handle it in a way that makes you feel comfortable.
Yeah.
And as we'll touch upon, it is inevitable. So if the relationship goes as planned,
Right.
it's inevitable. So
It's not a catfish situation.
Yeah, I mean, if that's what you want to do.
Yeah.
It's not very ethical,
Rejection.
but
No. I imagine some of your findings were expected outcomes. Did anything genuinely surprise or shock you during your research?
no, not
Okay.
really. I think that I had anticipated because, I have been through
Mhm.
these experiences.
Mhm.
So I know from the side of someone who doesn't disclose on their dating profile.
Mhm.
I understand that experience, and also speaking to my sister, I understand her experiences. Yeah, nothing shocked me. I think just what I learned kind of reaffirmed the sort of rough ideas I had. I was like, oh yeah, this makes sense. But when you're doing a research project, you are kind of just like, oh, I'm really glad this makes sense. I'm really glad this
Okay.
links into what this links into other research that's been done in the past. I can take these ideas and hold them up to other
Okay.
sort of theoretical ideas. So I was just really glad that it was all making sense.
Okay.
And
Your research was basically to confirm your already preconceived notions of
in
what
a
it would be.
way,
Yeah.
yeah, in a
Okay.
way, it wasn't to solve a problem.
Mhm.
I wasn't trying to figure some problem out. I was just wanting to explore the idea. I just wanted to understand and explore how different disabled people deal with online dating with a disability. And then, like I've said, how they deal with disclosure. I just wanted to get my fingers in there and just take a look around. Um,
What did you
I,
learn?
Well, I learned a lot. So I think would behoove me and us and you all watching is if I just give like a little theoretical some little theoretical nuggets just to help
Oh,
give
yeah.
you some insight and understanding. I think that would be a good place to start.
Okay.
Yeah.
So, defining the word disclosure. I keep saying
Okay.
Mhm.
it. I've said it a lot. Okay, so take a shot every time I say the word disclosure.
I
I
wish we
blackout.
should have did
Where's the drinks?
I would not recommend it.
that.
Um, so, yeah, what is disclosure? So, put simply, it's the act of conveying information about yourself. We
Okay.
also have the very similar presentation, and that is the idea of selecting information to
Uh-huh.
show or not about yourself in order to sort of manage others' perceptions about you.
Mhm.
So in my research, I define disclosure as simply telling somebody that you're disabled. And I
Mhm.
also explore when and how one chooses to disclose. So, for example, do you include a picture of you with your mobility aids? Do you write it in the bio? Do you do you even wait until you meet in person? And what are the reasons you did so or chose to do so or not? So my research does deal with presentation as well as disclosure, but for simplicity's sake, I'm just going to say disclosure, and I'll use it as an umbrella term just
Okay.
from now on. Also, I don't know how many shots that was, but
Mhm.
Oh my
there's
God,
there's
probably like
there's
5.
there's
Too
plenty
much for
more.
me, I'll
Oh
tell
my
you
There's
God.
that.
plenty more. There's plenty more to go. So, as I sort of briefly mentioned, there has been previous research done on things like self-disclosure and self-presentation, sort of in general, both in the online and offline environments. But
Okay.
there was only one study prior to mine, at least at the time, that dealt with, and the researcher's name is Natasha Saltz, Good old Natasha. Thanks, Natasha. And she also examined these ideas through the lens of online dating as a disabled person. So, what was good for me is I was able to use this previous research on disclosure in general alongside Natasha's research to sort of filter my study through those concepts and their findings.
Yeah.
So, one tiny little bit of theory to go, and then we can start talking about the findings. I just think it's really important to kind of
To
give
set the
like a
stage.
little bit of supporting information. So dating sites or apps are can be termed as something called mixed mode. So
Oh,
meaning they take place in both the online and the offline environment. Okay.
okay.
And I'm sure, as we all know, the whole purpose of dating sites is to form, or not the whole purpose, but the main purpose is to form relationships, right?
Yeah,
And if all goes well, to eventually meet in person. Now, the
hopefully.
internet can be seen as a disembodied space, right? Which
Yeah.
affords anonymity and freedom from things like the body, the self, and in this instance, from impairment and from social stigma. Okay? So it's a place where we can show aspects of ourselves and hide aspects of ourselves. Not to deceive, but particularly in terms of online dating, in order to present both an accurate representation of ourselves alongside being as desirable as possible.
Right.
Okay?
Wow, that's wow. Yeah.
Yeah. So what's interesting, and this is something that Natasha Saltz mentions in her research, this disembodied this disembodiment for physically disabled people can almost have the opposite effect, in that she says it can force us to be confronted by a heightened sense of awareness of our bodies and our disabilities, and thus also confronted by the matter of disclosure. Okay,
Wow.
so as I'll mention a little bit later, when you're online, it's not done for you. You, as it is when you're offline, you have to decide whether or not to disclose. You have to decide, when do I disclose? How do I disclose? And how will this person respond if and when I do? So
Yeah.
that is the fundamental question. Disclosure will more than likely happen in a successful relationship, whether you want it to or not, in a way you may want it to or not. So, how do we, disabled people, negotiate disclosure alongside this inevitability of meeting in person? And what are the reasons we choose to do so? And how does it impact the relationship going forward? Additionally, how do we deal with all of this in tandem with the universally understood idea that good relationships are based on openness and honesty?
Right.
Okay?
It's so in depth, and as you're talking about it, I'm like feeling myself. I don't know, like almost. I understand much better of
Yeah, you worded
myself now, if that makes
Thanks.
sense. Like, like you just told me everything I've thought, but it's in such clear terms that I'm
Thanks.
like, oh my god, oh my god, that it was just a come to God moment.
I'm so flattered. I wish you guys were around when I was doing my interview.
Me too.
Oh, I would
That
have
would have
loved
been.
that. Because, yeah,
I
you just
still,
word things and I'm like, wow.
I still have my interview questions if for some random reason you want to do an episode or something where I
Oh my
ask you these
god.
questions.
Oh, we
And
have to
a
plan that. I'm
a
100% down.
1000%, yes, we're doing that.
Yes, we will definitely have to get that on the board.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I think that would be really fun.
That'd be
Um,
such a cool idea.
yeah. So anyway, shall I continue, or do
Yes,
you
please,
guys
No,
want to?
sorry.
please.
I
I'm like
I
cooked.
interrupted you.
Okay,
I
I'm really
apologize.
glad. Well, I'm really glad because I was like stressing out about how I was going to take this like really dense sort of academic, uh, thesis and sort
Right.
of condense it down in a more like
Right.
approachable
Dumbing
conversational
it
way.
down
No,
for
no,
the
no.
average
I think
person.
you did perfectly, and
Okay.
I
It's
think
so easy to
many
follow
people,
along.
yeah, I
Oh,
think many
that,
people will be hit by it just like I was. So
yeah.
go
Yeah, it
ahead.
puts
Well,
into words what you don't know how to say, really.
Yeah.
That's weird.
exactly. And that's what a lot of the people I interviewed said, which made me feel really great because when I was going through online dating and disclosing and having my strategies and methods, it's really hard. And I'm talking to these people now about it, and they're like, "Oh, me too." Like, no one ever talks about this stuff. Like,
No.
and it just really made me feel like I was doing something. I was bringing something to light that affects a lot of people,
Absolutely.
and I just am really pleased that I got even just to talk to these people about it. And we both would leave the interview feeling less alone, less
Oh God.
isolated.
Hey,
That's
little
So,
wonderful.
bond.
yeah, that was really nice. I guess it would be good if I just briefly touched upon sort of my methodologies again. I did
Yeah.
mention that I mainly conducted in-depth interviews. So those are interviews that I think on average lasted like over an hour, I think. So
And
long
these were
interviews.
with disabled people.
Yes, they were
Okay.
all
Okay.
physically disabled people.
Okay.
Not all of my interviewees had CP,
Mm-hmm.
Hmm.
but I was just focused on interviewing physically disabled people. Not because I wanted to exclude mentally disabled people for any strange
Right.
reason. Just I needed to focus
Yeah, you
Yeah.
need to narrow
basic.
it down.
Yeah, yeah. So I conducted these in-depth interviews face to face. So I did a lot. I did all the ones face to face that I could, and then some of them I did over the phone.
Okay.
Okay.
So after I sort of gathered all that information, I suppose firstly as well, I should say that the reason I decided to do these sort of long form interviews is really just because I wanted to gain as much insight and information as possible on people's opinions and experiences with online dating. And I wanted to make sure that my interview was kind of semi-structured, I suppose you would call it, because
Yeah.
I wanted the the conversation to be as organic as possible and to go where it needed to go. I obviously have my focus, so I need to keep it focused as
Hmm.
much as I can, but I also don't want to exclude possibilities of other really interesting, in that case, experiential information. So
Yeah.
I wanted to make sure that I had my questions, that I was keeping on track, but I was also making sure that the people I interviewed had the time and the space to think and reflect and, give me their responses. Then, after I did all my interviews, I did something called thematic analysis. Basically, you can tell what that means. In that, I just sort of I transcribed all the interviews, and then I went over them to sort of identify any themes or patterns that had emerged.
Got it.
And as I was conducting my research, thankfully, some recurring themes and patterns did show up. And
That was relieving.
yeah, so I don't believe I can talk about absolutely everything today. So I have picked just a select few examples to discuss.
Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah.
great. Walk us
Yeah.
through.
Any questions so far? I don't want to
Um.
keep talking myself and make it feel
Um.
like a presentation.
I personally am loving this so much and I'm eating it up. So whatever you want,
Right, leaving no crumbs.
say it. Yes.
Well, we're about to get to the we're about to get to the really juicy part now.
Yes, I love it.
I'm so excited.
Yeah.
I'm ready.
Whenever somebody would sincerely ask for my research, I would just tell them to skip to the findings. Nobody needs to read like my literature
background.
review, my like methodologies. Like as interesting as that is, and I have sneakily given you a little bit just to give like reinforce what I'm about to say, right?
Yeah.
But usually I'll just tell
Definitely.
people just skip to the last chapter. So
The meat and potatoes.
yeah, exactly.
Yeah,
So
we
this
put
is where,
chapters in. I don't.
yeah, this is where we are now. I've given you the cliff notes. So basically, in terms of my findings, I found, I did find this in my research, but it has also been agreed upon in previous research. I just want to disclose that. But in
Okay, let me
this,
just.
I'm talking about my research. So when I say I found, I do mean I found, but not like overall. I didn't
Yeah.
uncover anything that hasn't been uncovered before.
Some crazy
So
discrimination.
yeah, I know, crazy, something completely novel and like groundbreaking. Imagine. So
Nobel Prize.
exactly, I'm waiting. So in terms of what influences one to disclose, I don't know how many times I've said disclose now, but I'm pretty sure none of us would still be awake at this point.
Yeah, I'd be lit.
Yeah,
I'd be
exactly.
gone.
A rough
This,
hangover.
this is not a game for beginners. So, in terms of what influences one to disclose, I have the visibility or conspicuousness of the
Okay.
disability,
Yeah.
the identity and the self. And you touched upon this, Sarah, and you didn't realize you touched upon this, the identity and the self. And thirdly, preconceptions and misconceptions held by others about disability. So it's important to say at this point that it's not one single element that can predictably cause disclosure. Rather, it's a multitude of forces, both internal and external, specific to each and every person that can influence disclosure. Firstly, we've got the visibility or the conspicuousness of disability. And the implication is this: do you even have a choice of whether or not
Me.
to disclose your disability? You know, in general, the more visible the disability is thought, the more imperative the need for disclosure. In
Right,
the
because
online, so in the online environment, like you were saying, Sonia, in the online environment, because if one uses a wheelchair, for example, or like me, has a unique gait,
me too.
oh, that's what I'm terming it. The
Laughing penguin,
disclose,
that's what I look like.
yeah, offline, the disclosure is carried out automatically. Okay, whereas
Hmm.
online, in this so-called disembodied world, you have to make the choice to disclose or not. It's not
Hmm.
made for you. Okay?
Hmm.
So, alongside this, the more visible the disability, the sooner the perceived need to disclose it. For example, be that in a photograph, be that in your bio of your dating profile. Conversely, the less visible or conspicuous the disability, the less the perceived need to disclose, or at least the freedom one has to negotiate disclosure in terms of timing or method. Okay.
No.
So
Yeah, that
to
makes so
use,
much sense.
yeah, I'm glad. I'm really glad.
No, it doesn't.
Thanks.
Yes.
No, I'm glad. I'm glad it all makes sense. So to use myself as an example, I use elbow crutches. So
Oh,
I so I can choose whether or not to have them with me in a picture
Right.
or a video call. You wouldn't know that about me until now because I've both presented myself in a particular way and
Right.
because I've disclosed it to you just now.
Right.
So, any questions or anything you want to mention about the visibility of disability?
So I think it's really interesting. I think it's like something you would just assume, but now that you say it, like, obviously, the more obvious your disability is, the harder it is to kind of cover up, or
Yeah,
the harder it would be to kind of put yourself in a more positive situation. So
yeah,
that's very, like, obvious, but, like, a dumb
yeah.
moment for me, I guess, you know?
Well, this is what I mean when you were like, did you have any surprises? I was like, well, no,
No.
because this all makes sense,
Yeah, it's
but
logic.
then you figure out why it makes sense.
Right,
Yeah,
And
exactly, yes,
that
exactly,
is where like the interest is. You're like, oh, well,
yeah,
obviously, but now I know the reasons why
yes.
it's so obvious or that it makes sense, you know?
So, like, you
yeah.
can almost be whoever you want to be on the internet to a
Yeah,
point of your
yeah,
disability. So that, yeah, in itself is kind of crazy and
yeah,
can be
The
misconstrued,
filtration,
I'm
yeah.
sure, but yeah,
yeah, yeah.
crazy, yep.
I wanted to
So,
ask one
yeah,
question real quick about visibility. So would
mhm,
you say that the less visible that it is, would you
yeah.
say that like maybe did they wait till in person to disclose it and then say a more visible, did they disclose it online? Did you like touch on that when
Yeah,
you were saying?
that's kind of what I would mean by timing. You know, the sooner you disclose it. So as soon as someone goes to your profile, rather than waiting until you meet in person. That's what
Okay.
I mean by sooner. Sooner
That's
rather
like,
than later.
that's like seeing a beautiful girl and beautiful girl picture, and then in her bio, she puts, I walk with crutches. First of
Yeah.
all, would a guy or girl even read that? Would
Yeah.
they
Yeah.
just see the picture and go, ooh, she's hot, I want to see
Yeah.
her, so
Exactly.
that is really at the heart of your research, I guess,
Yeah.
but so cool,
Well,
yeah.
that's the interesting thing is I don't know at the time if I were to do my research now, I wonder how different. I don't think it would be drastically different just based on what I'm actually specifically researching, but just in terms of, I don't think when I was conducting that research all those years ago, Tinder and stuff was like
Right.
employing their whole swipe left or right thing. I
Mhm.
don't think that
Oh,
was as prevalent as it is across dating sites and apps as it is
I
today.
know. So that was gonna be a question for me and you, but if we can sidetrack a little bit just for a
Sure.
second, I was wondering, like, at the time, were these people looking for like a love relationship, or were they looking to hook up? Because the
Um,
culture today, it seems like
more hookup
everyone's hooking
culture.
up and no
yeah.
one's.
Yeah,
But
that's a fair
that's,
point.
that's me looking at it as a 32-year-old in a relationship. I'm
Yeah.
not young right now, so I don't, I'm kind of
Yeah.
biased myself in that way.
Sure. From what I remember, some of my respondents were already in relationships. Some of them
Mm.
weren't. I don't recall, at least it's not in the findings of my research. I don't recall asking them specifically why they are using these dating sites. But that might have been a really interesting question to ask.
I guess that
Um,
would be a little awkward too for you. Like, are you looking to hook up?
look, I definitely pried as much as I could, so
Right, you're like, I want all the
yeah.
deets, no
But
filter.
it's a fair question because if you so say for example you have a disability that's more conspicuous and you forget or for whatever reason don't include a picture, but you do include like a description of your disability in
Mhm.
the bio, people wouldn't see that nowadays. So you would be disclosing, but that disclosure wouldn't be received. So in effect,
Right,
you
Oh,
wouldn't be disclosing
right.
in a way,
That's,
you know?
yeah,
So you would then need to like, I don't know, maybe like double check.
yeah.
Do you know, if you start
all right.
talking to this person, being like, "Oh, did you read my profile?"
Yeah.
Or
There's something
because
really important there.
yeah, like please. And
Yeah.
I remember online dating and knowing for a fact even back then, that people didn't read my profile.
Right,
Just like
right.
in general, they didn't.
Mm-hmm.
So they
Yeah,
would
Right.
they'd be
ask you
like, "Oh, that was
questions
on my
like, yeah, like what age are you? What do you do? You know, this kind of thing. And I'd be like, well, it's
Well,
on there. And yeah, so that would be really interesting. And then, you know, or what could happen is somebody swipes and you match and they don't know at that point that you're disabled.
mhm.
But then you could either check with them or they maybe would go back to your profile because I know I did that. I would match to someone and then go back to their profile and then, you know,
Yeah.
find out a bit more because
Mm-hmm.
if no one's going, if they're
yeah,
not going to actually match with me, then I'm not going to. But if I did and I really liked someone, I would go back and I would read more about them, just have things to talk about, and I was curious.
Right.
So maybe that would happen. And then
Yeah.
who knows? Like what would they would maybe unmatch you or
Yeah.
then they would be like, hello. So yeah,
Right.
that sort of brings like an entirely different sort of
Perspective. Right.
yeah,
Yeah.
a different aspect, a different mechanism to
Yeah.
disclosing now, just with swiping. So you would
hmm
hypothetically need, if you really wanted to disclose, it would
Right.
need to be front and center in your picture
Right. Right.
nowadays.
right, yeah, because the
Hmm.
bio was seen right away.
So going back to your second finding, something I said that I didn't
Yes,
realize it.
you did,
Okay.
and I was so happy. I was so
Okay.
happy that you mentioned it.
He's even social researching right now.
I know, like I'm writing it down. No, no, on she said. So talking about identity and the self, right?
Okay.
And I do have to say that identity or the subject of identity is like really complex.
It
Okay,
is.
Um,
right,
Yeah.
makes
but
sense.
but fundamentally for my research, it refers to how integral your disability is to who you are, how you view yourself, how you
Okay.
want others to see you. So basically, I found that the more your disability shapes and forms a core part of your identity, the more probable, the more willing, and less stressful the disclosure should theoretically be. So that's
Mm-hmm.
what you mentioned, Sarah, talking about disability being a part of who you are. So, for example, one of the people I interviewed, she was a member of an inclusive basketball team, meaning the team was made up of both disabled and able-bodied
Oh, that's so.
um, team members, but her CP or her identity was strongly based around her CP. She told me during the interview that she saw her disability as an asset rather than a disadvantage. And I have a quote here that I thought was interesting. She said, I used to think I was who I was despite my disability, whereas now I do see it as I am who I am because of my disability. So, further encouraging her sense of self was that she was a part of part of a community of other disabled people, and perhaps more importantly, non-disabled people who knew her as a person, as a teammate, and thus who didn't stigmatize her due to her disability.
Mm-hmm.
And all of these things helped sort of lead her to disclose her disability on her dating profile in multiple ways. So, in a photo, in the description, she probably mentioned it when they started talking. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? So, in any way she could, she did. Now,
Mm,
notably, she uses an electric wheelchair. So,
okay.
here we have the matter of the visibility of disability playing a
Mm-hmm.
part in the decision making process as well. Like I mentioned, I can't assert that it's one single element that is responsible for disclosure,
Okay, there to
but
20.
instead a set of forces that encourage or dissuade it. And so I'm sure that since starting the MoxiePod, this resonates with both of you guys in some way, right?
Yeah,
Yeah.
definitely.
Absolutely. Yeah. So when someone sees me outside, very obvious I'm disabled. If someone sees a picture of me they really can't tell,
Yeah.
I have no crutches, I have no chair. So in a sense, this reminds me of me when I was online dating. So I can make myself look as good as I want to.
Hmm.
Not physically, but I didn't have to say anything about my disability, and it was so empowering, and it made me feel better about myself. But then at the end of the day, I had to, like you said, disclose. And then it made me feel kind of worse about myself because I really had to look at myself and say, well, how would I describe my disability? So, yes, seeing myself on camera all the time is still extremely hard, but I
Yeah.
think it's worth doing. So, guess what? I'm gonna suck it up and keep doing
Yeah.
it.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
And since starting this podcast, not only are you seeing yourself a lot more, but you're doing something that's specifically sort of intertwined with your disability and who
Mm-hmm.
you are. Does it make you prouder of your disability? Does it make you less insecure or anything like that?
I
Because
would
you're doing this disability related podcast.
Yeah.
I would say that it makes me more comfortable with it. Like I'll say, a few years ago, I would run away from it. I would want to pretend that it didn't exist. Like obviously, I have some daily challenges, but I could get away. I'm very self-independent, so I could get away, and I would just ignore, like as if that made it less real or something, because I was just
Hmm.
so insecure about it. I wanted to be normal so bad. I wanted to do all
Yeah.
the things everyone else was doing, but through
Yeah.
starting this podcast, just having such an open discussion about it, meeting Sarah, meeting other people that we've talked to who share similar experiences to me has made it feel like more normal to me and that I'm not as isolated in it. And I would say it's made me embrace it more. I don't know if I'm necessarily proud of it, but I guess I am in a way because it, like how that lady said, it is, I am who I am because of my disability, if that makes
Yeah.
sense.
Yeah, it does. So another sort of a
Fine.
motive or influence of disclosure I
Mm-hmm.
found was the misconceptions and preconceptions held by others about disability.
Mm-hmm.
And it's pretty inarguable that negative attitudes surrounding disability are still
Yeah.
prevalent. And I'm not just saying that. There have been a number of recent studies that support
I
this
just see it
claim.
in my life around me.
Okay,
And
exactly.
and this isn't America. This is
This is everywhere.
Scotland, correct?
Yeah,
You're doing. So
yeah,
I think it's the same way over
It's
here too.
universal.
yeah,
Yeah,
It's
I
just
don't
yeah.
universal.
think.
I think the idea of negative attitudes is universal, but I think that in places like the US and the UK, what these negative attitudes constitute are quite different. If we're talking about
Okay.
like the Middle East or something
Right.
and
Right.
their, treatment of
Yes.
disabled
Yes.
people and ideas. But yes,
Cerebral.
Mhm.
so negative attitudes, they're everywhere.
Mm-hmm.
And these can be things like people making assumptions of you, judging your abilities, your intelligence. That happens to me a lot.
All the time.
Simply, yeah, people staring at you or giving you odd looks, sometimes worse, quite frankly,
Yeah.
discrimination in general.
Mhm.
Um, what are some of the what are some of these things that you have dealt with? Each of you,
Mm-hmm.
do you
I
have
have
any
dealt
specific ones?
with all of the above.
Yeah.
Constantly, my intelligence has been doubted by
Yeah,
like my peers and then also people older than me. I actually one time was at the doctor's appointment for my vision. My vision's affected because of my CP. And this nurse who or whatever you call them, the person who does that eye exams, so not like the ophthalmologist, but she like I was with like my mom, I think, and she didn't even speak to me. She spoke to my mom. She's like, "Oh, can she read?" Keep in mind, I was
yeah,
like 13 or 14 at this time. And I just felt so offended because it's like
yeah,
how, like, why are you assuming that I'm illiterate? And if you don't have
exactly,
a doubt, talk to me. What?
exactly,
So
exactly. It happens
that's
all the
Yeah.
time.
right. That's an extreme example, but like just on like small basis, I feel like what I say a lot of the time is undervalued. I feel like my opinion doesn't carry as much weight. A lot for like other
Hmm.
people might think that. And then
Hmm.
also I have definitely gotten discriminated against, and I have, like how you said, I get looks all the time when people see the way I walk. I
Yeah.
can see them like almost like double take. They're like, "Oh."
Yeah. Yeah.
And then
Yeah.
sometimes they'll ask about it. Little kids will be like, "Oh," which I don't mind. Little kids don't know. They'll be like, "Oh, why is your ankle sprained? Why has it been sprained for so long?" And then I have gotten bullied like in school. So yeah, I've been
Oh,
through all of those.
yeah. What about you, Sarah?
Yeah, you know what I just thought about? Like, would you assume an amputee cannot read?
Exactly.
No,
That's a
right?
that's a good question.
So why would you think someone who walks differently or talks differently can't
Yeah.
read or can't understand or,
Yeah.
so yes, I've experienced all of it, and plus I was pretty timid, pretty self-conscious as a child, so maybe my quietness or my kind of shyness made them think it even more so. Like
Yeah.
maybe my action contributed to it in a way. But yes, I've been through it all.
Yeah.
Everything you said, yes.
Yeah. I mean, you both brought up individually some of the points that I'm about to make, which is good. So, what we're fundamentally talking about here is the idea of stigma, social stigma, right?
Right.
Disability is a stigmatized identity. And
Mhm.
also, while I was conducting my interviews, this social stigma, I found, well, people told me that this social stigma, these preconceptions and misconceptions, are the worst part of being disabled. How
I
other people, how society treats us or views us
I
is
would
the
agree.
hardest part, is the
Yeah.
most difficult part.
Mhm.
Definitely.
Um, so, like you said, Sanya, you mentioned feeling undervalued, and that is one of the aspects of a stigmatized identity is being devalued. Okay, so
Yeah.
and being negatively stereotyped,
Uh-huh.
and it along with it comes this sense of otherness. Okay, so
Mm-hmm.
we are outside of the normal, we are abnormal, we are separate, we are
Outliers.
other.
Yeah.
And I'd say it probably comes from a lack of understanding or
Yeah.
awareness that fuels these misconceptions and these preconceptions. That existing research supports this. It shows that social stigma is one of the main determining factors of disclosure, just in
Mhm.
general. And in my humble opinion and experience, it's probably the main factor. So I think we can all relate to that in one way or another. So those are the kind of what are called antecedents to disclosure. Those are what will impact, whether or not you disclose and how you disclose and things like that. So some additional themes that cropped up during the research process was what I've called selfless and compassionate disclosure. So this idea follows on from what we were talking about, that the awareness that we have that other people may have these preconceptions and misconceptions, fears, or stigmas about disability. And as a result, the balance of handling disclosure leans towards compassion for them rather than for oneself.
Mm.
Yeah.
So, for example, a lot of the people I interviewed, for instance, mentioned that they can understand that finding out the person you've been speaking to or seeing on camera or imagining a life with is disabled would be a lot to handle.
Yeah.
It
And
would be.
they
'Cause you don't
they would
expect it.
then they would then try to disclose when they did in a light-hearted or even a humorous way,
Right.
not solely as an act of sympathy,
Mhm.
but also as a way to kind of dispel any potential fears or worries that that other person may have
Right.
about disability.
Right.
Like if you're comfortable with your own disability, it allows the other person to relax about it too.
Okay. Yep.
True.
Yeah. So can you relate to that when you tell people about that you have a disability or about your disability? Do you kind of negotiate it in a way that maybe makes it a bit easier for them to um, not to understand, but it makes it easier for them in terms of it makes them feel less awkward or something like that?
I remember writing like after I matched with someone when they was on those online sites, I would try to make it a joke almost, or
Mhm.
provide as much humor as I could in
Mhm.
Yeah.
describing, oh, I'm clumsy, oh, something like that,
Right.
Yeah.
I tried to make it cute and funny and in the best
Hmm.
possible light I could,
Hmm.
like,
Yeah.
so they almost like, they didn't feel like they would have to take care of me, I guess.
Yeah.
Oh,
That was
that's
Yeah.
good.
my big assumption, that people would assume I would be needing to have someone take care of me for the
Yeah.
rest of my life.
And let's just say here that
Hmm.
everyone's going to be disabled at some point,
Yeah.
Right.
in some way or another.
Inevitable.
Yeah.
We're going to get old, we're going to be injured, you
Hmm.
know? So, according to sort of statistics that I've found, 16% of the global population are, they say are disabled, but I was unsure. I couldn't find out what that actually meant. But,
Hmm.
Mhm.
were they born disabled? Were they physically disabled? Did they become disabled? I wasn't able to ascertain where this figure came from, but that's still a
Hmm.
minority, right? So we're still a minority, and
Yeah.
then that's why we're stigmatized. But 100% of people are going to get old, well,
And then
unless they
they have
die
all these
first. But
issues.
yeah, exactly. So if you're lucky, you're going to be old and you're going to be disabled.
Yeah.
So
Right.
if you're lucky, yeah,
My father, he was in a really bad ATV accident, and he
right,
suffered some brain injuries. And
Mhm.
now living is harder for him
yeah,
physically.
yeah.
And now he's complaining to me, his disabled son, about how
Hi,
hard it is.
Catherine.
And I have to catch him sometimes. I'm like, yes, Dad, I fully, completely understand
I get it.
where you're coming
You're
from.
preaching to the choir. Yeah.
Right.
Yes,
Someone who was
yes,
born with brain damage.
Yeah,
yes,
exactly.
exactly.
The sort of the last theme that I would like to touch on is
Hmm.
the impact of disclosure on oneself, on the
Oh,
person doing the disclosure, right?
Yeah.
That
yeah.
was something that came up across all my interviews. And I relate strongly to this, quite frankly. For me, this was probably the main motive for my not disclosing on my dating profile. And in this, I'm talking about the effect that either imagined responses or actual responses can have on your self-esteem,
Hmm.
your willingness to disclose at that time, or even to disclose in the future.
Yeah.
It's quite frankly, it's a horrible thing to believe that somebody may really like you, but then if and or when they find out you're disabled, those feelings may change because
Yeah.
of
Yeah.
That's
something that,
heart-wrenching.
yeah, because of something that you can do nothing about.
Mm-hmm.
So fortunately for me, I haven't experienced any negative responses. All my partners have been compassionate and understanding and open to understanding. Um, and the relief, you know, when that happens is pretty fantastic, to be honest.
Yeah.
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 With that
Right.
being said, my research sort of suggested through the interviews that the impact on yourself of positive reactions to disclosure would all like I mentioned would change your approach or your willingness to disclose in the future. But for
Yeah.
me, I've only ever had positive reactions, but I don't think these positive or rather non-negative experiences would cause me to change my approach in the hypothetical future. Um,
Okay.
I guess because there's still too many unknowns and
That's
there's
so weird.
still stigma. So I don't think based on that one factor alone, I would change. A lot of my respondents did say when I asked them about their experiences when they disclosed and the reactions or the responses from those people, and when they were good or not bad, I guess they said they would think things like, "Oh, why did I wait so long? I can't believe why was I being so nervous?" and that kind of thing. But I think I couldn't say, based on the research I did at that time, that that then means, oh, next time you're going to remember this. The next time you're going to change your approach. There are too many, as we've been speaking about today, there are too many of these influences and factors and forces that will sort of influence if you disclose and how you do it. But yeah, as I said, I honestly feel like it just comes down to stigma, really.
Yeah.
I think
Gotcha.
that is, as I mentioned, the main
Yes.
the main deterrent of disclosure for me.
When I did online dating, I would not say anything about my disability on my profile. But
Hmm.
if someone was interested in me, I would always make it the first thing I told them, you know?
Okay.
So I
Okay.
did have a lot of negative reaction. Like, guys were genuinely mad at me for not saying
Oh.
something in
Hmm.
my profile, which it didn't deter me from not doing it again.
Good.
Like, yeah, but it gave me again the stigma. It made
Mhm.
me feel like maybe this wasn't the place for me to
Like,
find someone, you know.
yeah.
So
Yeah, that's
I
fair.
will say that. Did you
Or
have?
maybe it's just that wasn't the person, right?
Oh yeah, of course
That's
not.
also
No.
a
Mm.
possibility.
Did you have when you interviewed people? Did they ever have negative outcomes like that or negative
Yeah.
responses?
Yeah.
Responses.
That was something that did come up for the people that were in relationships. Evidently, that went well, and
Mhm.
they would
Okay.
say about their current partner that it actually brought them closer together. And
Mhm.
this just all ties in with everything I've spoken about, your sense of self and
Mhm.
all this kind of stuff. Someone understanding you, bringing you closer together, being open and honest,
Right.
all this stuff makes sense when you talk about it together, thankfully.
Right.
So yeah, they felt like, why did I wait? Oh, I should have trusted this person. Now that I have, I feel like it's made our relationship stronger and all this kind of stuff. But in terms of answering your question, a lot of people, like you mentioned, would say things like people would be angry or upset in some way because they felt like they'd been lied to.
Betrayed.
They
Yeah.
felt like you'd been hiding something.
Mhm.
And that
Yeah.
all sort of relates back to trying to present yourself as accurately as
Mhm.
possible while having to
Mhm.
balance being attractive.
Mhm.
So, that's one of the yeah, that's just that we're in between a rock and a hard place, really,
Huh.
quite frankly, with
Yeah.
that. So
No
it does
kidding.
happen. But I'd
I
say
have a
more often than not, probably the response, if you get one. I don't know. Am I being pessimistic? I can only speak from experience, so I
yeah.
don't
Yeah.
know. But I know for a fact that it does. It does happen for sure.
Can I ask you? Were people, the disabled people, looking for another able-bodied partner, or were they open to either or, disabled
Yeah,
or not?
I remember the people that were in relationships, it was able-bodied people, as far as I can recall. I didn't
Mm-hmm.
ask every person this question. I only asked it if it, or they would reveal it to me,
Okay.
if it came up. But it wasn't one
Mm.
of the questions I asked. But I remember that a lot of the people that were in relationships with able-bodied people.
Okay.
And I think it really came down to the fact that it just wouldn't be practical, really, I think, you
No.
know.
Yeah.
Um, and that I guess I'm only speaking for I'm only going to speak for myself in this case,
Mm-hmm.
okay?
Yeah.
For me it wouldn't be practical. It wouldn't be
Mm-hmm.
practical. I don't need a carer, but I need someone to help me with certain things.
Right.
Yeah, me too.
Yeah.
So,
If
I
neither of us
mean,
can do that,
you know, relationships are all about give and take. Relationships,
Right.
each person has the responsibilities and things they're better at or whatever. It's just one of those things. You know what I mean?
no.
I do what I can, but I do need help. And it wouldn't be practical. It wouldn't be comfortable for either of us.
Mm-hmm.
But I guess that depends on the
I guess
disability, you know?
I think that it's hard to say unless you've been in a relationship.
Yeah,
And
you would need to see.
every physical disability at least it's there's a scope, right?
Hmm.
So I used to tell
Particularly
my
with ours. Particularly with ours. For
right.
CP.
sure.
Yeah. Oh,
Yeah.
yeah.
And so when I was young, I used to tell myself I need to find a deaf man. So
Oh God, because you're insecure of your voice?
I know.
No!
Either way, I would love anyone, disabled or not, but it was just funny that I put that in my head, like,
But
oh
you know what would
no.
happen? He would be lip reading and be like, "Oh my God, please stop talking at
Yeah,
me."
absolutely.
We'll
Oh
find
man.
we'll always find something that pisses us off about our partners, whether
Yeah.
it be your voice or what. There's always going to be something.
Thank you
Please,
for doing all that
thank you.
research.
Oh,
I
Yeah, I
think
no
can
worries.
that
imagine.
how many years were you researching this?
Well, that was for my master's, so that was all
Uh,
done within a year. My master's course
okay.
was a year. And
Okay.
then my previous research for my honors, that was, I think that was also done in a year. So yeah, I was just limited by the length of my course,
Your
you
time.
know.
Yeah.
I would have
Well,
loved to have done, you know, I would have loved to have had longer to interview more people, to try
mm,
more things, but
Yeah, that would have been
I
kind of
didn't.
cool.
You know,
uh,
I remember suggesting to my advisor, I was kind of joking. I was mainly joking. I was
Mainly.
like 80%, 85% joking, I would say.
Okay.
So I was like, what about if I just have like multiple dating profiles of me and I disclose in various ways, I don't disclose in various ways, I put
That
it in a
was
picture, I
so.
put it in the bio, and then I just go out with a bunch of people. Like I
oh
just
my
go on a
god.
bunch of dates and I
Oh my
and
God,
I
look
like
at you
I
go.
tell them when I see them in person, and then I can just like report back on what they said. And he was really into the idea.
I
And
like
uh,
that.
and I was like, well, I need to wear a camera. I don't know. But then, you know, I was like, would the university fund just like me going out to dinner like five
Mm.
days a week for like the next 6 months? Are they going to pay
No,
for my wine and meal? Like, probably not. But he was like, you should do that. I wasn't secure enough to do that. I'm not
uh,
secure enough to do that as a person. My
uh,
self-esteem would be completely destroyed, probably.
out the window. No.
Even for science, I can't do it. I'm sorry. But I was like, he was like, you should do it. And I was like, maybe my PhD. So yeah, that's what I
Oh
did
my god,
instead.
that sounds like a reported journalism or whatever that's
Yeah,
called. Like
investigative
that's
journalism. Yeah.
yes,
Yeah.
investigative journalism. Yes, that sounds so
I would
cool
love
to
to
me.
do that. Well, no, I wouldn't love to do that.
that'd be
One
so
of
fun.
you can do it for me
I'll do it.
and then
I'll,
tell
Right
me.
through the dirty work.
I'll
Yeah.
do it. It sounds so fun to me. I'll put myself
Yeah,
on the
yeah,
chopping block.
write it down as a
Yeah,
to-do for the future.
There you
for
go, new
sure.
career.
Well,
Yeah.
Anthony, again, we loved having you. We want you
Thank
back
you very
again.
much.
Literally
If you
loved it
want to come
so
back,
much.
talk
I had
about
such a good time. Yeah, I
more
really did.
yourself. I have one more very serious question.
Oh
Okay.
God.
Very
Loki,
Okay.
when she said that, it's the most unserious thing ever.
I'm
Okay,
prepared.
very Sandra.
Oh no.
It's very serious. Okay.
Okay, I'm
Okay,
Okay.
my
taking it.
bad,
I'm
my bad.
taking it. I'm taking
Hold
it
your
Is
face.
seriously.
is Hogwarts real?
No.
Ah! You just crushed my like 8-year-old soul. I'm like dying inside.
Well,
You're asking the wrong person. I am not a fan of Harry Potter. So
Oh
I
my
have to
God.
say
We're
I
okay.
not
have to say
posting this.
no. I have to say
All
no.
right.
But I will
Fair.
say that Scotland is plentiful with castles. We
Okay.
have
I
many a
it's on my
castle.
list.
Beautiful castle.
Great
Doesn't need to be
way.
Hogwarts.
Right,
Great
maybe it's
way
better
to
than Hogwarts.
end on a
Yeah,
positive note. Thank you,
yeah.
Antony.
No, thank you guys.
We want to be a voice for the CP community, offering experiences, insight, and advice. We want to help anyone feeling alone. We are your CP friends. Hopefully, along the way, we can change the narrative on CP one episode at a time. Okay, bye guys.
Bye, guys.
Bye. Thanks for
Bye.
having me.